Hello, welcome to the first session of this course. We already took the introduction earlier. And so in this first session, we're talking about analyzing your business environment. So if you are entering into a building, you begin to observe that building from the moment you drive into the street, and then you see the gate, you enter into the compound, and you already begin to have some perceptions about certain things concerning this building you are going into, even before you enter the building itself or the particular apartment, if you get what I'm saying. So say you are going to visit a friend, and as you are driving into the street, there's a riot going on, or there are massive craters and potholes. You will begin to have second thoughts concerning continuing with that journey of getting to your friend's house. But if it's a lovely place, you begin to also notice from the streets, from the neighborhood, from the way the buildings are arranged. Why am I saying all this? So before we get to talking about your business in particular, we want to do some analysis, or I want to point you to some things that you need to notice or consider in the general business environment. So that is what this session or section is about. Welcome. And so when we're talking about analyzing the business environment, like I just explained in my analogy, we'll start from the external, what we call the macro environment. And when we're talking about the macro environment, you want to be considering the general Nigerian business environment. What does it mean to do business in Nigeria? If investors are coming from outside the country, this is usually common to foreign investors. They want to know, because doing business is not the same in every country. The average Nigerian generally will say, it's hard, it's not easy doing business in Nigeria. Why? Why do we say those things? We're talking about the macro environment. We're talking about political factors. We're talking about economic factors, social factors, technological factors, legal factors, and environmental factors as well. So those are the things that you need to consider when we talk about the macro environment. And all these factors have changed even in the last 1 year. They are no longer the same post-COVID. In many ways, the coming or the happening, of COVID-19 pandemic changed these macroeconomic factors, not only in Nigeria but globally. But we want to look at the changes that they brought in Nigeria. So those are the ones that we want to talk about. When we talk about the macro environment in Nigeria, we're talking about factors like cost of doing business, cost of finance, that's how much like bank interest rates, how much you spend in sourcing capital, in borrowing money. We're talking about the infrastructure. We're talking about the economy as a whole. We're talking about government regulations and international trade. As far as the business outlook of the Nigerian macroeconomic environment is concerned, there are many organizations, many bodies that have tried to analyze, and predict what we should be looking out for in the general business environment in this year 2021. And I'm going to be sharing basically from the business outlook session held by the Faith Foundation, which is one of the foremost entrepreneurship schools in the country. So according to them, and particularly in a session, taken by one of the senior consultants from the foremost professional services company, PricewaterhouseCoopers, we're told that Nigeria ended, as at the end of last year, Nigeria, was still the largest economy in Africa. Yes, even more than South Africa. So we're still the largest economy in South Africa. The largest economy in Africa as at the end of year 2020. Unfortunately, this does not change the fact that inflation rate in Nigeria is still almost 16%. Inflation rate for the layman just generally means that, the rate at which cost of goods or prices of goods and services are increasing. So meaning that you buy something, you bought something yesterday, by the time you're going back to the market, the price has increased by about 16%. And then you have lower interest rates. We had lower interest rates, so loans were more affordable last year, and they still are, because there are so many opportunities, of getting loans now. So many organizations, local and international, offering COVID relief loans. So there are lower interest rates for those that want to borrow. And then, but unemployment rate is still quite high at 27.1%. Last year, a new CAMA law was promulgated, that's the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, that has changed or has brought some adjustments or amendments to reporting, the reporting that CAC requires companies to do, particularly online now. Also, last year, we saw a lot of insecurity through protests, strike actions, land borders have been reopened. Unfortunately, for those that have investments in the money markets, the yield is lower than before, or was lower last year, still quite low. It will also interest you to know that 99% of businesses in Nigeria, when you talk about SMEs, 99%, research shows that 99% of companies in Nigeria are not even small enterprises, talk less of medium, they are micro enterprises. They are at the level of hustling, if you like. And the budget, part of the things to consider also in this macro environment is the budget that the Nigerian government released for this year. There's a high deficit in the budget, meaning that the country's accounts are not balancing. There's not enough money for the things that money needs to be spent on. And so what would this mean? This would mean that the government is going to become more, driven as far as taxation is concerned. There will be a higher tax drive, a stronger tax drive, and there will be new creative taxes that the government will be asking, businesses and individuals to pay. Part of the things that happened from last year and are still going on this year is rising foreign exchange rate. Rising foreign exchange rate, and this year it's been predicted that the naira will continue to even fall more. The rate of the naira to the dollar is still going to, get worse. Some people have predicted that it will get as high as 800 naira or more to a dollar. There's increase in cost of fuel, petrol as well, because government has removed some subsidies. Cost of electricity is also higher because the electricity distribution companies have also increased their rates and tariffs. And then you would ask yourself, okay, what do all these things have to do with me? Exactly the question that strategy will demand that you ask. When all these things are happening in the macro environment, macroeconomic environment, you must realize that in one way or the other, they will have some effect on your business, on your school business. And so you want to plan for those effects. Take, for example, if we are saying that inflation rate is at almost 16%, 15.75%, meaning that the cost of goods are rising at that rate, then you know that you are going to be spending more money on your business, things that you bought, things that you paid for, at a certain price. All of a sudden, you are going back to the market to buy those resources, whether they are books, whether they're stationery, whether they are liquid soap, whatever it is you use in school to run your school, the prices have gone up, or the prices will be going up. Before you know it also, you would expect that your staff also will start complaining and asking for salary increase. Why? Because they are also feeling the pinch of inflation, that the salary that you were paying them before that could, see them through the month is not getting through the month anymore. So you know that when you are hearing this, high macroeconomic terms, you must realize that they have an effect, directly or indirectly, on you and on your business. So inflation rate means that you prepare for rising costs of doing business. But lower, when you hear there are lower interest rates, then you ask yourself, okay, is this a good time for me to borrow? If you were looking at getting a loan, then you know that the time might be a good time, to get a loan because interest rates are lower. When you hear there's 27% unemployment rate, that tells you that there are many people out there looking for jobs. But again, we know that there's high unemployment rate does not mean that we have an equal number of employable people. So unfortunately, there's that anomaly in the Nigerian environment where there are a lot of people that are looking for jobs, but unfortunately, many of those people don't have the required skills to be employed. And then you want to know more about the new CAC law, which generally has just made or is requiring businesses to do most of their reporting and filing online now, so that it's more difficult for you to get away with regulatory requirements. Insecurity protest strikes, that they are still in the air. The strike actions are still there. The protests, that we had in October, the NSAS protests are still, likely to come back. The protesters or the protesters are saying, they are still aggrieved. So you want to think ahead and begin to prepare for all these things if they happen. You plan for the worst and pray for the best. Land borders are open now. So if there were things that you are getting from neighboring African countries, neighboring West African countries, you know that, okay, the prices should come down a bit. They shouldn't be so difficult to get anymore because the borders are reopened. If you have investments in the money market, you are thinking again, okay, the money market, the best place for me to keep my money now, since the yield is low. When you hear that 99% of Nigerian businesses at micro level, they are struggling businesses, they are hustling businesses, then you know that if you have parents who say they are business people, expect that they will probably, if you have a lot of parents that are business people, the percentage of your parents that are into private business, if it's large, then you know that you probably need to give them payment plans. You probably should expect lateness in paying fees and all that, because the average Nigerian business is not a very big business. They are micro businesses still at the level of struggling. And most SMEs were told even die and close up in the first 5 years. You should expect that the government will be more, on your neck, as far as tax is concerned. You want to get so you may be telling yourself, okay, this is the time for me to make sure that I have a good tax consultant. I'm not caught at the wrong side of the law as far as tax is concerned, because government is not smiling. They need money to cover that deficit in the budget. When you hear that there's a rising foreign exchange rate, when you are hearing that the naira is getting higher and higher, as against the dollar, then you are thinking of things that you buy, that you import, resources and materials that you import and that you use in your school, and maybe this is the time you want to begin to think of good quality local substitutes that will not cost so much, because as long as the naira is rising, the price at which you are buying those foreign goods will also be rising and be eating into your cost of doing business. Like we've said, fuel is costing more now, and electricity is also higher. You need to plan and prepare for that. Electricity is said to be the #1 biggest cost of Nigerian SMEs across different industries. Most business owners in Nigeria say what they spend money most on is on electricity, either in form of the bill, the PHCN bill itself, or in the form of buying fuel to run generators or whatever other kind of alternative power supply. And so you need to plan for that. So at the end of the day, in the midst of all these challenges, all these predictions, the moral is not for you to be afraid and close down your business, but that in all of this, you want to see the silver lining. There's always a silver lining behind every cloud. There's always an opportunity in the midst of problems. And even analysts are saying that for the business that will thrive this year, for the business owner that will succeed, you need to continue to develop yourself. Self-development is the key. Reinventing yourself is key. Repositioning your business so that you are able to navigate all these problems, and then having a good and healthy network of a support system where you are continually being guided in what to do. Commitment to excellence is also another key thing that will stand you out in this macroeconomic environment of today, standing out of the crowd, being known for excellence so that the customer prefers you. And then finding better ways to do your business so that you are saving costs, you are saving expenses. You want to sit down with your staff and look at all these macroeconomic indicators and ask yourselves, how can we mitigate these increasing expenses? How can we mitigate these on rising costs of doing business? Like I said earlier, if, for example, most of your parents are business owners, then you need to preempt, think ahead that these people that are doing into small business, what are we going to do if they begin to owe school fees? What can we do to avoid or prevent them from owing us school fees as against those that are salary earners? And even for those that are salary earners, you know that quite a number of them also lost their jobs last year during the COVID pandemic. Part of the things that will stand you out in this macroeconomic environment, considering all these factors, is to also continue to seek for feedback from your customers, from your staff. You don't want to have a blind spot. You want to make sure that you are not leaving any stone unturned. You can't know it all and you can't see yourself completely. So you want to, for you to thrive, for you to mitigate all these challenges, you want to continue to ask for feedback, constant feedback, which you will be using to continuously improve yourself. In this kind of environment, is not the one that you are going to relax and think and just relax and be praying. No, you will do what you can do and allow God to do what you cannot do. So continuous feedback, continuous improvement is the name of the game. Continuously improving your standards and committing to excellence. Technology has been said to be a major game changer in this economy, and in this year particularly. We see how technology gained a lot of ground last year, aided by the COVID pandemic. And so technology continues to be relevant, it continues to gain ground. You want to get comfortable with technology and know that it is here to stay, and not relax and think, yes, schools have reopened, COVID, when the schools are no longer shut down, I don't need to, do anything as far as technology is concerned anymore in my school. If you do that, you are going to lose out. So you can, technology remains relevant either through thinking of virtual offerings. Now your market is wider. Now, last year, COVID opened the eyes of everyone to realize that once you can get on the internet, then the world is your stage. The world is your market, not only just your locality or neighborhood anymore. So you want to see how you can leverage on technology. You want to sit down with your staff and ask yourselves, what are some services, what can we provide online? How can we do what we're doing and also offer it to the global market online through technology? Digital marketing is another thing that rides on technology and that you want to leverage on, this year, based on all that has happened and all that will continue to happen in the global economy. So technology is one way that you can, ensure that you are not missing out on any opportunities and that you are employing new methods to how you run, because those opportunities are unlimited online. There's no end to the number of customers, number of parents that you can get if you are going online, rather than if you are just looking at the ones you can see in your environment. So when we're talking about macro environment, these are the variables that you want to continue to look at and consider and see how they affect your business. So on that note, I would go on to talk about the microenvironment. When we talk about the microenvironment, now we're talking about the private school industry as a business, environment, not just the general business environment. The first environment, the macro environment we talked about, is talking about the business environment in Nigeria generally, regardless of what kind of business. So things that affect all businesses, schools and non-school businesses. But now narrowing down to the private school industry, what can we say? What do you need to bear in mind? You want to look at 5 factors, 5 that are often called the 5 forces of competition. These 5 factors are used to assess the level of competition that is in a particular industry, the amount of how competitive a particular business is, and in other words, how profitable that industry or that business is. And these are the 5 factors that are usually considered. Number 1 is called the threat of entry, meaning how easy is it for a new business to spring up, for a new in that industry. So in the education industry, you're asking yourself, how easy is it for a new school to spring up close to you? It's very easy, isn't it? It doesn't take anything. You can't stop it. Anybody can just decide to rent an apartment, the house opposite you or the house behind you, and start a school there. The bargaining power of buyers is another factor to consider in the level of competitiveness and profitability available in an industry. And in the education industry, that means you're asking yourself, how easy is it for your parents, for the customers to be demanding that you reduce your fees? This is usually a major thing for many school owners. Many times their parents are making demands and putting pressure for them to reduce school fees. I still had this discussion with a school owner last week, where you have that, bargaining power, where buyers have a high bargaining power and they're able to apply pressure on a business owner to bring down his or her fees. Then that kind of industry, that business, is highly competitive, because what usually gives buyers that kind of power is because there are many substitutes. So the number of substitutes available in an industry also is an indicator to how competitive it is and to how profitable that business can be. You know that in the education industry, there are many substitutes. There are schools everywhere. So you're asking yourself, how easy is it, or how likely is it for your parents, for your customers to find another school for their children? It's very easy in any part of Nigeria, because there are schools everywhere, because the barriers of entry into the school business are very low. It's very easy for anybody to start a school, as against maybe starting a bank. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry cannot start a bank, but any Tom, Dick, and Harry can start a school. The barrier of entry into the banking sector, in other words, is higher. It's more difficult for you to wake up one morning and say you want to start a bank than to start a school. It's easier to start a school. The bargaining power of suppliers is another factor to consider in the private school environment, in the micro environment. How easy is it, or how likely is it for your suppliers also to refuse to reduce their prices or to demand that you pay them a certain price? In the school industry, I like to refer to teachers as the key suppliers of what you are selling. Not even those that are selling educational materials. Teachers are your major suppliers. And teachers can, demand high salaries, especially if they're very good teachers. So if you are looking for very good teachers, you are forced to pay very good salary. And if your teachers decide also to resign, there are many schools that will be waiting to employ them. So the bargaining power of suppliers is also high. And then the last factor there is rivalry among competitors. How friendly is the school next door? How willing is the school next door to collaborate with you? Usually, in most parts of Nigeria, there's a high level of rivalry among competitors. So looking at this industry called the private school industry, let me give a bit more detail and show you another document still on this matter of the forces that control competitiveness and profitability in an industry. Just a minute, please. Yes. Let's look at the threat of new entrants again. This determines, like I said earlier, how easy it is, for a new business to spring up and take customers in that industry, where a low amount of capital is required. To start a school in Nigeria, depending on the kind of school, they are high, yes, they are highbrow schools, but they are also low-cost schools that just start up under a shed or inside somebody's house, not spending so much money. People can start a daycare center, a nursery right in their house. So the low amount of capital, where existing companies can do little to retaliate, then you know that the threat of new entrants is high. Also, like I said earlier, if a new school decides to open up in front of you, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't shut them down, Existing firms don't possess patents, trademarks. There's nothing that the Ministry of Education gives you, to stop other people from coming into the business. But there are some industries, like oil and gas, or like telecoms and all that have patents and documents that prevent just anybody from coming into the industry. Like in the telecoms industry, for example, you can count how many the major telecoms companies in Nigeria, because it's highly regulated. But in the private school sector, regulations are it's not highly regulated. Everybody and anybody is free to start a school. Many times people even start a school before they get registering the school. Still on new entrants, where you have customer switching costs very low. It doesn't cost any money for a customer to leave your school and go to the next school. Many times they would even leave your school without paying their school fees. They will leave your school whilst owing school fees and move to the next school. There's very low customer loyalty in the private school sector. Parents at the drop of a hat can decide to pull out their children. Why? Because they don't see much difference. They think the service that you're rendering is very similar to the next school. So all these factors, tell you that the threat of new entrants is very high in the private school industry. And like I said earlier, when we talk about suppliers, strong bargaining power. When we say suppliers have a strong bargaining power, that means that they are able to sell at a high price. They're able to sell at a high price. And and I was saying that for me, this means good teachers usually cost a lot of money, and they are not so many. They are hard to find. And so because of that, they can hold you to ransom. They can demand, and sometimes you have a teacher that is very good, and because the person wants to leave, you are forced to increase the teacher's salary. So the bargaining power of suppliers, who for you are basically teachers, can be quite high, because good teachers are scarce. They're hard to come by. And then we've talked about parents as well. Bargaining power of parents, where the buyers or your customers have a strong bargaining power, then you know that industry is very competitive. It's very competitive, and that's the case in the private school industry. Like I said earlier, because they don't need, nothing stops them. Switching costs are very low. There are some industries that for you to move from one supplier or from somebody servicing you to another, you have to pay a high amount of money. But not in the school business. There's little commitment. It's only one term school fees. It's only one term, so they can forfeit it and move on to another school. And there are many substitutes. There are many schools. So because there are many schools, parents have that power to threaten you, to threaten they will pull out their children and all that. And they are very price sensitive. You see the point there. Where you have, buyers that are price sensitive, the moment you increase your school fees a little, they are upset and they want to pull out their children. All these indicators are true of the private school business. And all this just goes to support the fact that it's a highly competitive business and can tend to be not very profitable because of all these parameters that are, all these factors that are evident in the industry. Substitutes, of course, like I said earlier, are very many. And just like there's hardly any difference between, maybe switching from tea to coffee. You can just decide, I don't want to drink tea today, I want to drink coffee. But if you want to switch from riding a bicycle to driving a car, you're going to spend a lot of money. It's not a decision you can just make when you wake up in the morning. So it's things like that we're talking about. And then rivalry. All this, talk is just supporting the fact that the private school industry is very competitive, and because it is in Nigeria, and because it is very competitive, it is also it can tend not to be very profitable because of all these factors we've said. It's very easy for another school to open up, for more schools to open up every day. Nothing stops them, nothing prevents them, and they don't even have to spend a lot of money. They can decide to open a low-cost school, a low-fee paying school. Government is not stopping anybody. There are no special rights given to schools that currently exist. The parents also, because there are so many options of schools, can be very adamant when you want to even increase your fees. They can be very, they can demand that you reduce your fees. They exert a lot of power. Teachers too, if you have good ones, and exert a lot of power and also insist that you increase their salaries, or else they begin to resign. And you know that as teachers leave, parents leave too frequently, parents lose confidence in you, and that creates another problem. All this just supports the fact that you have to have a good plan. You really need to know what you're doing, which is why you need a strategy, which is why we're having these discussions that we're having right now. You need to know what you're doing. You need to think through how you are running your school business, and you need to think through how all these factors will work for you and not against you. And so we'll stop here for now for this section, and see you in the next section where we'll be analyzing your school business now. We have looked at the environment, the business environment, both the macro environment and the micro environment. In the next section, we'll be looking at your own school business in particular. How do you analyze yourself and begin to make critical decisions to ensure that in that very competitive market called the private school industry in Nigeria, you still stand out, you still get a good number of customers, and you make enough profit to justify all your input and all your expenses and investments in the industry. So see you in the next session. See you in the next section. Have a good day.